was wondering, is there any, like, if you want to pull, like, verses that you'd like to discuss from each chapter or things like that?
Yeah.
We can kind of, like, get deep on, like, those aspects if you'd like.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of, for sure, there's definitely one that I would want to, and then I'll have to look at the other chapters. But the most famous verse from Ruth, like the key verse, most people, even if they don't know anything about the book of Ruth, if they've been in church or been to weddings or stuff like that, they maybe have heard this verse. So it's chapter 1, verse 16. This, just some context. This is after Naomi releases Ruth and Orpah from, their covenant and their relationship with her. She releases them, and then Orpah leaves. It says that Orpah leaves. Ruth clings to her, and Naomi tells Ruth again, leave, go. But in verse 16 it says this: but Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. And the cool thing is like,
wow.
So I love this verse. I already loved that verse. The first time that I read the book of Ruth, or studied the book of Ruth, I should say, it stood out to me. And I was like, man, what an amazing way to love your family. And then I kind of realized, wait, this is a story of like friendship and relationship in general. It's not just for a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship. Like it can be, but it's for a friendship. It's for a marriage. It's for anything like that. So funny story, kind of cool. When we went to do the rehearsal dinner for Olivia and I's wedding, Pastor Clint officiated our wedding. Shout out to Pastor Clint. And he goes and he starts kind of running us through what's going to happen. And he goes, yeah, and then I'm going to share the story of Ruth and Naomi, and I'm going to have you guys read chapter 1, verse 16, like out loud with me. And I was just like, bro, like this is the verse that like I love. And so Pastor Clint uses that verse when he officiates weddings. And when he pointed that out, that it teaches us 4 things about covenant, life-lasting relationship: that you have to serve one another, that you have to be with one another, like in proximity to, like you have to spend time together, be together, that you have to love the same people and the same God, like kind of goes back to like not being unequally yoked, in relationships and friendships. And then finally that it's until death. Like when you enter into a covenant, or even when you enter into a friendship, like you and I, we never said like, hey, do you want to be friends? Like we should, like, it wasn't like that. We didn't take an oath or a vow or anything, but like ideally, like in a God honoring way, like we, even if we move away or stuff like that, we'll still be friends and have like the bond and the brotherhood that we have until we pass away, So that's what I get from that verse. So now when I officiate weddings, I actually use that verse too. And people kind of raise the eyebrow to it because they're like, that's not a marriage, but it's the same thing. Like it's a relationship between people. So what do you think about it?
I was actually, I was just thinking, like, I feel like this verse, I'm gonna just read it again because it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And I'm reading from the New Living Translation. Ooh, let me lower that. And it says, but Ruth replied, don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us. So that really hit me because I instantly started thinking of David and Jonathan. Like that was like the first thing.
I was thinking that while we were talking. Yeah,
like that just instantly came to my head. But not only that, but the connection that you made of where it's like, yes, this is dealing with like friendship and stuff, but it's just not friendship. It extends outside of just friendship, but it extends to marriage. It extends to brotherly friendship, family members, and things like that.
For sure.
And I think it really shows that commitment, attitude, and ambition. Like you said, like in this moment, she had every reason to leave. And then on top of that, in this moment, her mother-in-law gave her the out. Like she was saying, you can go. Like, I know the situation is jacked up. And she still decided to stay with her. Yeah. And so that makes me wonder, what areas in our life do we have the choice, or not only that, but the ability to look at it and be like, the way it's looking, I'm in the right. I can leave. Yeah. But what is God calling me to do inside the situation? Yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's not always leaving.
Yeah.
And that is the most difficult
Yeah.
decision,
Yeah.
honestly. That's the first thing that I instantly started thinking of, if
Yeah.
I'm being completely honest. Man,
Yeah. That's awesome.
how do you think on a deeper level this works with specifically kids in ministry?
Mm-hmm.
So like kids in high school and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that they can like incorporate this like in their life and in what they're dealing
Like
with?
how to apply this?
Yeah, like
Yeah, dude.
necessarily.
I mean, bro, like the biggest thing that we hear, bro, oh my gosh, dealing with teenagers, like it's like they're friends one week and then we're not friends the next week. I broke up with my girlfriend and then they're back together. Like, you know it, like you experience
Yeah.
it, like leading students. And it's just like kind of like that cancel culture mentality. Like, here's the thing. And this just kind of stood out to me. Like Ruth, it like context would tell us, I mean, depending on the way it was originally written, but at least the way that I'm reading it, that Ruth was married to Naomi's son. It says for almost 10 years.
Wow.
And she didn't have kids. So like she had all of these reasons to leave. Like she had no ties to Naomi, but maybe it was that bond that she had for 10 years. So I think the main thing is like, don't let like one moment of something negative or of something that's like not a positive situation or even a mistake that someone makes, because Naomi was grieving and she was hurting and all of this stuff. She was bitter. Like that's why she changed her name. Mm-hmm. And Ruth could have used that against her and be like, okay, I'm out. Like you're giving me the free pass. But instead Ruth did what was right and stuck it out. So I think the main takeaway from at least from that passage and from those verses for teenagers, but also for anyone is, to just be loyal, be a friend, be a Ruth-like friend, and be loyal to the people around you. Obviously, there's certain situations where you have to remove yourself from relationships and stuff like that. But it wasn't hurting Ruth. She did have to make a lot of sacrifices, but she did the right thing and stayed. So I think it's being loyal and not switching up, being consistent in what you're doing, being faithful in what you're doing, being faithful to who you're with. And when you practice that as a kid, as a teenager, and then you go into young adulthood, like think of if you've been friends with the same people and you've loved the same people and you've been with the same people and you've worked through conflict with people, like think of how that's going to go with you into your adult friendships and how that's going to go with you into your marriage and how it's going to go with you into your family. Because it's so easy when you're 16 years old and your friend says something that you don't like to be like, okay, we're not friends anymore. Well, what's going to happen when your wife says something that you don't like? Oh, we're not married anymore? No, that's not how it works. Like if that's what you teach yourself growing up, then that's how your mind's going to go. But if you do this and you're loyal and you stay with people and you serve people and you love people and you're in that covenant relationship with them, even though there's no formal covenant, you will know how to deal with conflict and communicate through hard times. Just like think of, just on a practical side, think of the relationship and social skills you'll have if you approach your friendships and relationships as like, I'm in this and like, I'm not going to leave or abandon this. And that doesn't mean you have to be best friends with everyone. Yeah. That's just, it's like, you're going to be loyal to people and you're going to love people. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah. that makes a lot of sense. Actually,
yeah.
It really does. One thing that I was like thinking of was how this I feel like this kind of shows that commitment that Jesus has with us. And then not only that, but you see this coming from, would you call her basically like a Gentile?
I mean, yeah,
Ruth?
pretty much. Yeah, because Gentiles are anybody that aren't Jews. So, yeah.
And this right here just reminded me of that, her showing that, I would say, like that godly self-sacrificing commitment.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of the other portions to where Gentiles are doing things that are just kind of monumental that just doesn't make sense. Like you have her right here being fully committed. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, she has every right to leave. Some people would probably say, no, you should go back to your hometown where you have family to where they can take care of you and things like that. Yeah. And then I remember there was one portion, I think it's in John, with the Roman soldier who sees Jesus crucified on the cross. And out of all of the Gentiles and even the Jews, he's the only person.
This was the Son of God. Yeah.
This was the Son of God. And he just sees it. It's clear to him. But yet at the same time, it doesn't make sense. And that like kind of reminds me of what areas in my life am I struggling to understand and it just doesn't make sense. But God's trying to reveal something to me.
Yeah.
Does that
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like that's the hardest part, at least for me, is because when things aren't making sense to me, that requires me to have trust and faith. And that's the most difficult part. You know how like logical I am. If it's not making logical sense, it's like, nah, forget that trash. I don't even want to deal with it. Yeah. So my question to you is, specifically for this, well, actually, let's actually go on to chapter 2.
Okay.
Your favorite verse from chapter 2, and then we can kind of go into the other questions.
Oh man, can I throw in one that's at the end of chapter 1? It'll be
sure.
quick.
However you want to do it.
This actually was one that I'm seeing my highlights, and this is actually one that stood out to me the most recent time that I wrote it. So at the end of chapter 1, they've got back to Bethlehem, which is where Naomi and her husband were originally from, and they go and they meet Ruth and Orpah in a foreign land because there was a famine. They come back because the famine's done. And one of the things she says when she gets back there with Ruth and the people that recognize her, they're like, is this Naomi? This is Naomi. But she says this in verse 20 of chapter 1. Don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So she wanted her name to be changed from Naomi, which meant pleasant, to Mara, which meant bitter. And like, I understand that. She lost her husband. She lost her 2 sons. Like, she should mourn and she should be sad. But one thing that stood out to me is, like, at this moment, at least, she was taking for granted the friendship that she had with Ruth. So I think just a practical takeaway, because Ruth had chosen to come with her no matter what. And she's saying, I came back empty. Like, no, you didn't. You have somebody that has chosen to literally attach their life to yours when they had no practical reason to do that. So I think for me, it just teaches me to not take for granted the people that are in my life that are there. Because it's super easy to, think like, oh, if I just had this, or if I just had this. And we can start to think that with our friends and our relationships too. Well, if I had better friends, or if I had this, think about the friends that you do have in your life. Like, I have amazing friends and amazing people in my life, and I don't want to take them for granted. So that was just something that I saw at the end of chapter 1.